In the last section, we had a discussion about how Redux decides whether or not you have updated your application state in a reducer. The end result of all that discussion was a realization that if we want to update our state object, we cannot just modify our existing object. So I cannot, like, the whole thing I'm trying to convey here is that we cannot do something like state.email equals action.payload and then return state. Okay, that is like the whole goal here. This is what I'm trying to convey. If you do something like this, Redux is going to compare the old value of state and the new one that you have returned. It is the same object in memory, and so Redux is going to think that nothing actually changed within your application and no updates will be sent off to your components. So instead of returning our state object here, we have to return something that makes Redux just gonna think that we made a change, right? That's like the whole goal here. We're just trying to trick it just a little bit into thinking we actually changed the value here. So this next part, I don't really have a fantastic lead in. So we're just gonna throw the code on the screen and just talk about how it works. So I'm gonna take that little bit out. And now the return statement right here, I'm gonna do a little bit of an update. I'm gonna make an object. I'm gonna say ... state, email is action.payload, and then close off the object like so. You can read this line right here as plain English. It says, make a new object. Okay, that's the outer parentheses, or excuse me, outer curly braces. Take all of the properties off of my existing state object and throw them into that object. Then define the property email, give it a value of action.payload, and toss it on top of whatever properties were on that state object. Okay, so if email, or if the state object already has an email property, it will be overwritten by this one that we are trying to add in on top here. So by default, when our reducer first runs, we're gonna have an initial state of email is an empty object, right? Like that's what we start out with. And then a user is gonna like select in the email input, and they're gonna press the like S key, right? For steven@gmail.com or whatever it might be. We're gonna get an action.payload of S, like the string S. We're gonna hit this line of code right here. This line, the ... state, is gonna come across as email is empty string. We're then going to throw on top of it email with a value of S. It is going to overwrite the existing property on the state object, okay? So the last part about this, so that's a little bit about what's going on inside of it. The really critical part though is the fact that we created a new object right here. So we made a brand new object. We took all the values off the state object and threw them right in there. So because we made a new object, when we return this from the reducer, Redux is going to say, okay, yeah, I see that you have a new value here. Is this brand new object right here equal to state? And of course, because this is a brand new object, a new object is allocated in memory, and no, they are not equal. Therefore, Redux knows that we actually changed something. Oh. So that was a lot of buildup for one simple little line of code, right? That's pretty much the whole story. That is what is going on with this line of code. That is why we use the ... state here. That is all I'm trying to convey. When you return a value from reducer, if it's an object, you gotta make sure that you produce a brand new object. Otherwise, Redux is gonna think, oh, it's the same object, I don't have to actually do anything. Whew, that was really a mouthful. Okay, so now we can get back on track. Actually start writing code again. Our reducer should now be producing the correct state whenever a user types in a key, like types in an email address. Every single key press that they put in is going to call our reducer. We're going to reformulate our auth piece of state, and then we need to send that back down into our component. So that's what we need to do right now. We need to make sure that this piece of state ends up back inside of our login form. We've done that a couple times now by using the map state to props helper from the React Redux library. So remember, the map state to props function is how we end up getting some piece of state into our component, in this case our login form. So the first thing we have to do is define our map state to props function at the bottom. So down at the bottom of my login form, I'll define map state to props. This will be called with our global application state, and it is our job to just return the property that we care about from that state object. So I think that right now, the only property we really care about is the email. So I'm going to say, give me the email. It's coming from state.auth.email. Remember, it is specifically auth because that is the value that we assigned our reducer to in our combined reducers call in the reducers index.js file. And then our reducer is what is actually producing this email property right here. After defining map state to props, we're going to pass it as the first argument to our connect function. So map state to props, like so. And now, inside of our component, we have access to this.props.email, and it is the value that was produced by the reducer. So now, very last step, inside of our input, I'm going to add on the value. I'm going to say, hey, this is what your value is. You're not telling us what the value is. We're telling you what the value is. And it's going to be this.props.email, like so. So wow, that was a lot of work to just make one text input. A lot of work. Let's do a quick test in the simulator, just to make sure it's working. So I'm going to select my input, type in something, and yep, it's working. Just the way I would expect. You might click on the password as well and type in here, and you might be thinking to yourself, hey Steve, why does this work? We didn't wire this up with everything. Well, yeah, it works, but we can't actually pull, or, we're not reading the value out of it, right? We're not getting the value out of there. The email field is working as we expect it to. User presses something, we update our application state, and then at any point in time, whenever we want to get access to that email, the text that's actually in there, we can reference state.auth.email. Okay, so we are now done with that first input. I think this is a good time to take a break, to do a quick review on what we've done, and then we're going to come back and do the exact same thing for the password. Like I said, I'm gonna drill this stuff into you one way or another. So let's take a quick break, do a quick review, and then knock out the password field as well.